Rupe, Idapur and independence. And Shahji put these Jagirs under the charship of the Shivaji. And slowly and gradually, this Jagirs become the independent territory of the Shivaji. When he was coronated in the 1674, everybody knows about that. And he took the title of the Chhatrapati Shivaji. Now, when Chhatrapati Shivaji became, I'm coming to these, some of the, I've already mentioned about that, the historiography. We all know that what the political activities was done by the Shivaji. A brief period he was the Chhatrapati, but after that, after his death, his son becomes, and there was a Mughal and the Maratha relations were already there. After the death of Aurangzeb, there was a cordial relations that started from the central government of the Mughals with these Maratha states. And there was some contention for the collection of the Sardeshmukhi and Chauth, we all have. But under the ruling Peshwas, the expansion of the empire was happened. And then expansion of this empire was done not only in the Deccan Plateau, but now it went beyond its region. And we see that we had under the able Peshwas, the three Peshwas, they already developed the expansion of the empire. But the one thing I found that they did not rule the other areas beyond this Deccan Plateau. There was no direct rule. There's no direct administration. They didn't appoint any central authorities. So somehow it is lacking that somebody said, was it really a Maratha empire? Or it was a Maratha kingdom? Though it was having the vast territory till before the Battle of Panipat. So they had their influence in the North India. They crossed the border of the Mughal territory and they challenged some of the areas. They collected the Chauth also. And to some extent, we have already mentioned in the history that the Marathas also raided the port city of Surat. And Surat was at that time in the Mughal territory. So they looted the Surat. Even they sent their raids into the Bengals. After Bengals, they raided Bengal. What was the purpose of this? The purpose was to collecting wealth and the revenues from there. But if they would have appointed a permanent governors, so that might be under the direct control of the Marathas. But that was lacking when I was reading this. So they were influencing more and more times. Even once time they went up to the Delhi when there was a chaos was created. Ahmad Shah Abdali, and before Abdali there was the Nadir Shah invasion, and the Mughals, the latter Mughals, basically they were losing the things on the Delhi and at the North India. So see, Madhav Rao, who was in 1772, in 1772 he invited the Emperor of Shah Alam II to come on Delhi. He was living in the pension on the Britishers, they have protected them, and he was not leaving the capital. So it was the credit goes to the Marathas, the Madhav Rao, who called him to come and see your affairs of Delhi. That was the influence of Maratha. So Maratha's contribution cannot be declined in the political sense. Maratha even helped the Mughal, you can say dynasty, Mughal rulers, like the Emperor Shah Alam II. That was happened. I thought that Mughal, basically it was not the bone of contention between the Marathas and Mughal. I think it was basically the Marathas were helping in the Mughals, and they continued the things that was created by the Mughals also. So Mughal administration was also to somehow reflected in the Maratha territories. Though after the Battle of Panipat, their power declined. And when the British, they took the two places. I would like to mention the two things. One thing that was in 1803, there was a siege of Aligarh, the place I belong to the same. Aligarh in UP, there's Aligarh Muslim University, big university, central university, now it is on the top ranking university of India. There we have one fort, Aligarh Fort. So Aligarh Fort was under the control of Marathas. And that Maratha was, that Maratha, not of direct here, but it was the Sindhyas of the Gwalior. And we were not too much large distance from the Aligarh to Gwalior. So Gwalior was very near, and these Sindhyas of Gwalior, they were as collaborating with the Marathas. We know the Maratha Confederacy. So now the central power declining, but the power of this, the Confederacy of the Marathas, like the Sindhyas, Holkar, Bhonsles, like this, increasing. So somehow they were representing the Marathas. So at that time, he was controlling the region beyond the Agra and Aligarh areas. So Agra, Aligarh places were under the control of the Marathas. And the Mahanti Scindia was the ruler of that Gwalior. So what is happening? See, in 1803, Maratha, the advancement of Maratha can be also seen by the appointment of the good officers, European officers, and they have employed as a mercenaries, like they have employed with the administration the French mercenaries. French armies were under there, and there was a General Perrault. General Perrault, one of my hostel when I was living there, it was the residence of the General Perrault. If you go today, now this time the Suleiman Hall, and the main gate of this Suleiman Hall, you can see in the Aligarh Muslim University, the residence of Perrault. It was the same Perrault residence who was the general of the Mahanti Scindia, and he was controlling the Aligarh fort. But fortunately, unfortunately, what happened that there was in 1803, British came and General Lord Lake, he came and there was a fight started for the control of this fort and the region also. And the British defeated the General Perrault. But in that battle, Aligarh battle 1803, the 900 British soldiers were lost. And there was a loss of only 400 to 500 of the French mercenaries. So after the losing this fort also, the power of the Maratha now declining from the North India. One instance. Second instance was the Battle of Delhi, Patparganj. In the Battle of Patparganj, the Marathas were also lost to the British. So these two important in the North India, and one was the previous one that everybody knows, that 1761 battle, third battle of Panipat, that was disastrous for the Marathas. So they challenged the power of the Durrani, they challenged the power of the Ahmad Shah Abdali, and there was the chances of winning the Marathas. But what happened that the other regional powers like the Jats, Bharatpur Jats, like the Rajputs of Rajasthan, and some other powers of North India, why they didn't collaborate with the Marathas? Because, in my opinion, and what I read in history, the Marathas did some good work and some say that bad work. What was the bad work? They looted their country. That was the bad for them. I'm not saying. Historians are saying. So they looted their country, the Bharatpur Jats, so they declined to be in the side of the Marathas. Even Rajput, they declined to be the side of the Marathas. Otherwise, there was some other change. See, they might be defeating in spite of all these things, Maratha fought valiantly, and the Jaduna Sarkar here said, we lost, every pearls lost from every Maratha household. And we lost the Maratha, Maratha Sardars, so many Maratha Sardars were killed. And after hearing the news of that battle of Panipat, the others also. It may be one cause that Maratha was not trained to fight on the ground. That was the turning point. Maratha was trained in the guerrilla warfare. And there, the battle of Panipat, first time they were facing the Afghans. So they were trained to fight in front of Afghan. So Maratha was there because to see the train of this Maharashtra, we have so many mountains. So they were knowing the tactics. So they have now, I think there was maybe why they challenged the power of the Duranis and they came direct to fight with them. And thus they could not get the help from the other Sardars. That's why they lost the battle. But instead of all things, it was revived under the able Peshwas, and they do have carved their own territories. So they also conquered the Bengal. They sent some commanders to raid in the Bengal also. So Maratha influence was all over India. It was felt in all of India. In the South India also, in the 70s, which I will speak on that, they established the Maratha country. That was the direct rule I saw in the South India. Tanjore, Maratha established their power. Okay, so I have been mentioning about the sources. So very important I'd like to mention about the name of V.K. Rajwade sir. He was a doyen of the historian, he was a great historian. And what was his purpose of collecting before that? Sources. Okay. I mentioned about the two types of sources, Marathas, that is the Maratha Vakars and the Persian Vakars. That is called the Tarikh-e Vakars. If you read the Tarikh-e Vakars that was mentioned by the Jaduna Sarkar also is supported. And these were the same kind of sources that were written on the lines of the Tawarikh in Persian. It was a tradition of writing the history of the day-to-day. It was the Persian chronicles. So day-to-day history was written and something like that, Maratha Bakkars. And we have the number of Bakkars that were dealing with the ministers, administration, and 70th century history of the Shivaji periods. And that too was edited by the V.K. Rajwade. I would like to mention one. So this one of the historical importance of this Bakkar, Mahika Vatsi Bakkar. I don't know the Marathi basically. So you may Mahika Vatsi Bakkar. I'm sorry for that. Marathi accent is not coming to me. So if you read that Mahika Vatsi, it was very important, and that too was edited by our V.K. Rajwade, and he highlighted the history that was inside this. It had historical importance. There are the other Bakkars that was some of the historians are citing that Bakkars are not the real history, but they do focus so many aspects of the Maratha history if you read this in details. Then in these, if you're reading these sources, Bakkars and other was Agya Patra, I have already mentioned about that. So what I found that there we find the concept of Swaraj under the Shivaji. So what was the Maharashtra Dharma, concept of Maharashtra Dharma, and we can highlight the theory of kingship of the Shivaji, and these things, the rules and regulations, the philosophy of how to rule a country, all these things were reflected in these sources. If you go in details, you'll find out these points. Then Agya Patra by the Ramchandra Nilkant. It was an important source to know about the Maratha statecraft. I know that it was written by one of the minister of the Shivaji. I've already mentioned about that. So in that sources, we found the four things important that I have highlighted. Instrumental use of force. When to use the use of force in a Maratha kingdom. When there was somebody attacking on the Maratha country. So when you have to use the use of force. Then what should be our administration, what type of administration, everything was mentioned. Then civil and military relations with the other powers. Then the sense of the identity, being a Maratha, being under the kingdom of Shivaji, what we should feel like. So all things were written in details. Now, coming to the Maratha power in the South India, Tanjore. Tanjore Maratha kings, they ruled the Tanjore kingdom from 1674 to 1855. You know that in 1855, British take over the region and they started their own rule. But what happened before the Marathas in Tanjore? So if you see, before Tanjore, Maratha kings came to the Tanjore region, there was the rule of the Nayakas, Tanjore Nayaks. Tanjore Nayaks were there, and before the Tanjore Nayaks, we have the administration of the Vijayanagar Empire that was under the rule of the Krishna Deva Raya. So Krishna Deva Raya, he ruled that country, and under the Krishna Deva Raya, we have seen a lot of development in the field of art and architecture, culture, and the religions. So there was already a flourished culture was there during the time of Krishna Deva Raya. When the Krishna Deva Raya divided this kingdom into the Rayas or the Nayakas, governors, some of the governors, they were ruling on behalf of the Krishna Deva Raya was the Jinji Nayak, Dingil Nayak, Tanjore Nayak, Madurai Nayak. So these were the regional overlordships. They were ruling this region, Tanjore. But what happened after that? There was some problem started because these Nayaks, they were fighting all the times in the battles, and the Madurai Nayak, that is the governor of the Madurai and the governor of the Tanjore, they were separate. They got the autonomy, independence from the Krishna Deva Raya. So they were ruling this Tanjore land independently. One was ruling from the Madurai, one was ruling from the Tanjore, one was ruling from the Jinji, and so on. The four were there, principalities were there. So these were constantly fighting, and there was a story behind it that how the Maratha came to power in the Tanjore, that Madurai Nayak requested the governor or Nayak of Tanjore to get married of his son with his daughter. So he sent a proposal, marriage proposal, to the Tanjore Nayak, and that too was refused by the Tanjore Nayak. On his refusal, because of that, in the petty issue, he attacked the principality of the Tanjore Nayak, and the Tanjore Nayak was resolved by the Madurai Nayak. So the Madurai Nayak captured the Tanjore Nayak. When this was happened, after that, what happened that one of the son that was raised by the queen of the Tanjore Nayak, he was secretly sent to some other place under the one minister, and he was not there. After some time, the queen of the Tanjore Nayak requested the Adil Shah to reinstate his son, and he is the real heir of this throne. So Adil Shah sent one of the grandson, one of the Shiva's grandfather. He was sent to the Tanjore to go and help them. And because the Marathas, they came from the Bijapur Adil Shah dynasty to help the Tanjore Nayak, and the Tanjore Nayak's son was reinstated on his throne. So Maratha indirectly helped them, and the Venkoji, his name was the Venkoji. I mentioned the first king of Tanjore. He was there, but after some time, seeing the confusion in the other in that dynasty, he captured the power from the Tanjore Nayak, and he himself became the king of the Tanjore. So that in 1674, the history of the Maratha kingdom started in the Tanjore. So we had the first, next slide, please. So we see the Venkoji was the first king of Tanjore who became, and during his time, when he became the king of that, he didn't disturb some of the traditions that were going on in the Tanjore region, and he let them continue their language, their culture, their tradition. So the people of South, they realized that these Marathas, they are among them. They have not posed a threat for them, because he let the people enjoy with their own cultures. So Venkoji were very tolerant people, and he was a very tolerant person. He gave them permission. Okay, you can continue your language, you can continue your literature, whatever things. But slowly, they introduced their own culture in the Maratha, in that region. So under what was the political developments, when Venkoji became the king of that place, Shivaji Maharaj invited there, and he went and he attacked the Jinji and the Tanjore in 1617 and 1627. So that was because of Maratha influence, he was also invited to attack and get the booty from this place. So this was the political development. Venkoji was also allied with the Madurai Nayak. Venkoji didn't want to fight with the Madurai Nayak. So he thought that it is better to maintain a friendly relations with the Madurai Nayak to get his side against the Sultan of Mysore, because he was also trying to fight with them. So he was allied with the Madurai Nayak against the Mysore. So what was the real things that happened in the Tanjore region during the Marathas rule? And the first was the Venkoji. I thought that it was the period of the cultural renaissance. A renaissance begins in the capital city of Tanjore. What kind of renaissance? There was not the political renaissance, there was the cultural renaissance started. There is a growth of development of literature started. There's a growth of the music started. There's a growth of the dance, drama, music, architecture. Everything that was patronized by these kings, Raja, Tanjore Nayaks, Maratha Nayaks. So that was the real development that they gave to the capital city of Tanjore. And the first was done by the Cholas, and the second was done by the Marathas in that capital city. So Venkoji, when they started the cultural revival, and that revival was happened. And first time the Harikatha, one of your Marathi, I think it was the Marathi tradition of telling the stories, that was introduced in that Tanjore Harikatha during the time of the Venkoji. So that was the one revival. And other things, he patronized the cultural and arts. Okay, next slide, please. Still, there are so many points. I could not remember the. Okay. The before one slide. Venkoji, please. Right. I would like to highlight one point. Venkoji, first king. Before. Okay, huh. In the he was the, as you know, he was the founder of the Maratha kingdom. So this marked the a renaissance in the beginning of the cultural driver, and there was an artistic tradition developed. And one of the important developments that happened during his time was that he invited Sri Samrat Ramdas Swami, if I'm pronouncing the correct name, Sri Ramdas Swami, believed to be the guru of the Chhatrapati Shivaji to Tanjore. He invited the person, this old man, of this learned man, and believed to be the, in that tradition, he was the guru of Chhatrapati Shivaji. And when he came, there was a new kind of things introduced because he was inviting, and the Marathi tradition also started coming to the Tanjore. The story of the Harikatha, I told you, musical storytelling, it touched that in the south was introduced by the Swami Ramdas. This Swami Ramdas introduced that Harikatha because the people gathered and started listening to him. So that he was the Ramdas, Guru Ramdas, that he started the storytelling of the Harikatha in that region. Before that, it was not introduced. So that was the important development that happened in the Venkoji's time. After that, the next slide. Then Sahuji, actually somewhere it was written the Sahuji, somewhere it is Sahuji. He was one important king that happened. He was succeeded by the Sahuji. And at that time, he was 12 years old. And during his time, what happened, the political development, some of the Coromandel coast that was under these Marathas were occupied by the Mughals. That was the political development, one political. Trichy was also, Trichrapalli, that is Trichy in short form. And these areas before, during his reign, it was taken over by the Mughals. And they forced him to pay the tributes from these areas. That was the political development happened. Then in his period, there was a frequent fight, skirmishes happened and battles by the Madurai king, by the Madurai Naiyer. So there was some disturbance. Beside all these things, disturbance, he was also a patronizer of the art, literature, music, etc. And he was a great scholar. He was a museologist. He wrote first Marathi play. It's very interesting to note that he was the author of the first Marathi play. And he wrote important book, Shahji Rag Lakshman. That was the books on the ragas, theory of ragas. The same Maratha kings, not only they were the warriors, they were the fighters, but they were the good orator, they were the authors, they were the, they provide the so many things, condition, environment for the development of the dance, drama, music. So under their kingship, these things develop in that place. So he wrote that book. This was the book on the, and he composed at least 20 dance drama that is known as the Yaksh Ganam. Yaksh Ganam was the tradition of the Carnatic music, but the Yaksh Ganam was in the literary format that was composed by the Shahuji, and he wrote around the 20 dramas there. So we see them in the Marathi sources. If you visit the capital city of Marathas, there at Tanjore, there's one big library I'll mention, Saraswati Mall. There we can find the Marathi script, and that too was in the Modi scripts. And we have the influence of the South Indian, Tamil, Telugu also was there because the Marathas were in touch with all these areas. So we have this kind of developments. Many poets adorned his court. So many renowned poets of the time, they were living. If I could like to read, we have the devotional poets like Venkateswara Ayaval, Sadasiva Brahmendra, Bodhendra Swami were in his court. Siriappal, who wrote an ode to the king called the Sahendra Vilasa. So these poets, authors, and the others, musicians, they were living in that court, and that was patronized by the king. So they also appreciated the King Shahuji, and they wrote a poetry in his honor. So that was known as the Sahendra Vilasa. So he was also instrumental in bringing the culture and reviving the tradition of the South India. Sahoji. Then we have some composition of the Sahoji. He wrote so many things I could not name because these are the Lakshmi Narayan Kalyanam, Pancharatnam Prabhatam, Vishnu Palki Seva, Hari Hara Vilasam, Markendra. These are the sometimes dramas. Then Thyag Vilasam. Then after some times, he renounced the world. And he became a stick, and he left his throne for his brother Tulaji first. Next. After that, Shahaji left. He was the brother of the. He became the king of the Maratha. Sanskrit and the North Indian music were introduced during his time. Sanskrit was an important language. Before that, only they were promoting the regional language. But now the Sanskrit was also introduced in his court. And we have seen the Indian music, North Indian music were introduced. We have some bhajan, kirtan, all these things were introduced in that form during his time. He was a master of Ayurveda and astrology. He did work on he has worked some work on the Ayurveda and the astrology. And he was also the author of the many natyas, or the dramas, dance drama. He composed the Yakshaganam, Sevakami Sundari, Parinatakam. He also built a temple in the Pulira that the Mariam temple was established. So temple, drama, dance, music, literary revival was too much. And this himself composed. They were so learned. We cannot deny that they were having a very scholarly knowledge about these things. And they have some training from their gurus. That's why they were too much involved in these literary activities, cultural activities, and they do patronize in their court also. So Tulaji was also having so many things to his credits. Next slide. After that, we had the important king. Before that, there was one king started Sarkoji first and Tukoji. But their period was marked by not so much development, so I focus about the king Pratap Sinha. He ruled Tanjore from this period. I've already mentioned. He composed 11 plays in Marathis. So see the influence of Marathi culture and Maratha. Because language, it was written in Marathi. This was not written in the Tamil or Telugu. So Marathi language was taken into account and the Marathi plays were written. And he also established a matha in the Kumbakonam. If you go to the Kumbh, South India, nearby the Tanjore, he established a math. He wrote on Puranas, Bhagavatam, theatre, Kama Shastra. He was also a good author. He used to write on so many aspects of theatre, drama, Bhagavatam, and the Puranas, religious aspects, and the Kama Shastra. He honored the Bhagavat Mela. I would like to mention about this. What is the Bhagavat Mela? Bhagavat Mela, actually in the Tamil, there in Tanjore, there was some artists were there who performed that Bharatnatyam, and that was the Bharatnatyam, and they were the composers. So many artists were there. They used to perform not only in the villages, but also they perform in the court, in the palace. So these Bhagavat Mela artists, they were given the lands and the revenues, and they were patronized by the kings of Marathas. So Bhagavat Mela artists, and even the 5 villages were donated by the first king, Yankoji, to these Bhagavat Mela artists. And these Bhagavat Mela artists, they perform on the order of the court of the kings. There different kinds of the dance dramas, Yakshaganam and others, Bharatnatyam. So artists were patronized and they were given protection by them. So they were already praising the kings of the Marathas. So Bhagavat Mela tradition established there. Still today, if you visit some of the mature village of that Tanjore region, we could see a tradition that is still today, it is revived by the Bhagavat Mela artist. And there is a Indumati, I think she worked on that Bhagavat Mela tradition. What was the Bhagavat Mela? How it was revived under the Maratha kings, and what is this tradition? So that was revived by them. Still they're performing today. And that was mixing of the Bhagavad Mela with the Marathi language and the Tamil language. A new creation was done in the modern form. But that true tradition was in the Maratha times, there in the Maratha kingdoms. So they were also honored. They were also given money and wealth to revive this tradition. Without they cannot survive. Like today, the scholars, they're not being promoted, not given the scholarship. How can they work research work? That is the main things that happen. So they are also given the gifts and honors. Then after that, next, Tulaji. After that, he was the son of the Pratap Singha already. He established an endowment. He established a charitable trust like the yours, Naiyer Azam. See, for the Bhagavad Mela Nataka, this was some sort of trust, and the artists were associated with, and whenever they need the money and wealth to perform, to pay them in the honor, in the form of salary or the honor them. So this was a very important development, that one trust was established by the Tulaji for them. And Tulaji also, he was very good Veena player, accomplished player. He used to play the Veena. So he was also an artist. His period considered as the golden period for the Carnatic music and the dance. So if you read the full history of the Carnatic music and the dance, the period of Tula is very important. I am not going into the details. During his time, there were the four brothers. They were living, who were the master of the Bharatnatyams. They were adoring the time of the Tulaji. And the music fraternities were also there during his time. Renowned of that period. Musicians were there, Bharatnatyams were there, performers were there. And they were setting a very high climax, high height for this tradition of the Bharatnatyam. That was, the trend was set by these Bharatnatyams brothers, four brothers. I'm not going to name them. So they were very instrumental in setting the tradition of the Bharatnatyam. It was a high climax at that time. Whenever they went beyond the Tanjore, they established the same tradition. They set the mark for that. So that was how it was possible, because these Marathas, they would not have patronized them. That was not possible for them to revive and to make a reach to in the high pinnacles of the development. After that, we see there was his son Sarkoji, who became the next king of that Maratha, and he was the last but not the least. He was the best. But I'm mentioning about this. Sarkoji his upbringing was very different from the others. Sarkoji, at that time, now the British were coming close to the Tanjore, and they were politically now controlling the Tanjore, except the palace and some regions. So now they were not given, independence like this. They could not think independent mind. So politically, there was a problem for the expansion of the Maratha kingdoms. But now only Sarkoji confined himself to the cultural activities of this in his palace. So he was his son Sarkoji was placed under the Danish missionaries, and the place where I'm living, that is a Danish settlement near Tanjore, 50-60 km distance. There's a Danish settlement, Tranquebar. So the Tranquebar has their own history of Danish. So there the missionaries used to come from the Europe. So one missionary, his name of Hartwas was there. He was invited to the court of this Tanjore palace, and this Tulaji appointed him as his teacher, and he was given the training. So he not only received so many European language, but also the regional language. So under that Danish missionary, the Sarkoji was trained. And because of that training, he was having the mastery over the European languages, and he was ahead of his time. He was aware about the work that was done in the field of medicine, in the field of Ayurveda, in the field of other things. So he was very much aware, and he was a very avid scholar. So he sent so many people to go and collect the good works of the Europeans, and that good works are brought, and that was put into his library. He established a very good library there, Saraswati Mahal Library. I'm coming to. Okay, now coming to the Sarkoji. Sarkoji first, his period was not so a very short period. So this was the second Sarkozy and the important Sarkozy. When I went to the Tanjore, I saw the one of the portrait of the Sarkozy was placed in the Maratha Darbar Hall. And he was sitting just like gestures, having the European attires on his full in the body. So that was the personality. I thought in my first impression that who is this person? So maybe some importance. So that when I read about Sarkozy, I got the things. So Sarkozy was succeeded in 1788. For the 1-2 years, he was deposed by his uncle. And but after deposing, he lost the throne. But with the help of the British, he again recovered the throne with the help of the British in the 1798. So we can see that British had the control on the Tanjore. So British gave, okay, you be on the throne, but there should be political limitations. You cannot do anything. So British had the control of the region. The Sarkozy was a man of varied interest. After in his time, we can see there is one important development that happened about the establishment of the Saraswati Mahal Library, to which I was talking to some ma'am about that. So he was a literary man, he was a good scholar. So I would like to focus the contribution of the Sarkozy. What was his contribution particularly? So I'd like to mention one thing about that. Sarkozy, in the field of, he established the Saraswati Mahal Library. So it was the same Saraswati Mahal Library inside the Maratha Palace. We have a number of manuscripts of Marathi, Telugu, Tamil, Sanskrit, and in some other language. We have the manuscript of the Rig Veda that was written, and that manuscript was handwritten, that is called the manuscript. In that manuscript, we can see some of the important, paintings of the religious aspect, like Krishna paintings were there. So if you see the contribution of the Sarkozy, it was unparalleled because of his constant efforts. He sent some scholars to Banaras, Pandits, those who were living there, and he asked them to collect the Sanskrit manuscript, Sanskrit works of the important at that time. And he also constructed some ghats in the Banaras, Kashi. Okay, from there, the Pandit scholars, they collected the Sanskrit manuscript, Sanskrit works, and that was brought into his court. Then he went to collect so many works, European works that was on the medicine, on the other aspects, science and technology. And they went to collect these things from European countries. And that all these things were adoring at this place of the Saraswati Mahal. If I would like to mention some of the libraries, we have so many manuscripts that was written in the Modi script, that is the Marathi. There are the 7 lakhs of the Modi documents in 1,342 bundles. I'm highlighting this, okay? And there are 39,300 Sanskrit manuscripts, which represent the works of the author spread during the 400 years. There are more than 46,000 manuscripts in the form of palm leaf and paper. So we can see this library is considered as one of the biggest libraries, manuscript libraries in Asia. And it's an encyclopedia for all of us in the field of arts, medicine, literature, and different languages. So this was the contributions of the Sarkozy. After Sarkozy, the next and the last, you can say, the King Shivaji he was the last king. At that time, when he was there, Shivaji, after the death of Shivaji, her wife, she adopted one son. But after his death, the son was adopted, and that was not acceptable to the British. And on the pretext of doctrine of lapse, as you know, that was introduced by the Dalhousie, they said you can no more adopt a son. And now your country, your region, your kingdom is now being annexed by the British. So British took over the position of the whole Tanjore, including the palace. So what Maratha left there, besides all these things, There left the art and architecture also, the paintings also. I have seen a number of buildings that was constructed inside the Maratha complex. We have a Maratha Darbar Hall. It has the two parts. One part wooden, other part that was supported by the beams. And it's a bit good paintings were there. And we have so many portraits of the Maratha kings that was adorning the Darbar Hall of the Marathas. Then we have the big 7-story building that was called, and that was also renovated by the Marathas. And most of things important, the Maratha also had constructed some fort outside the Tanjore, because they divided their kingdom also into as a unit of administration. So there they also had constructed some forts to protect the Maratha Empire. So we have the arsenal buildings, we have the Maratha Darbar, we have the Maratha complex, and with so many temples that were attributed to the periods of these Marathas. Besides these, Marathas also had their influence in the Carnatic music and other things. So we can say that besides the political impact of the Marathas, we have the culturally more impact on the region of the south. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable information on political and cultural consequences of Maratha in South India. I would like to request Professor M.S. Nikam, sir, to give his vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Azam sir. So I will mention vote of thanks in Marathi. दक्षिण भारतातील मराठी सत्तेचा जो मोठा एक परिणाम राहिला आहे त्याबद्दल सर बोलत होते मगाशी. विशेषतः तंजावरचा जो प्रदेश आहे, अगदी याच्या अगोदर सरांनी बॅकग्राऊंड मांडलं आपल्या समोर की पानिपतावर आपलं युद्ध करताना कशा प्रकारच्या चुका आपल्या राहिल्या, की आपण जे म्हणतो गनिमी कावा पद्धत आपण जी स्वीकारली होती, तिथं तुम्ही एक फार उंचीवर जाऊन पोहोचता, पण कधीही आपल्याला प्रॅक्टिस नसलेल्या जी गोष्टी आहे समोरासमोर युद्ध करायची, त्याचं धाडस पेशव्या काळात आपण करून बसतो. तिसऱ्या पानिपताच्या वेळेस एक वाक्य असंही बोललं जातं की आपण जर बाजीरावाच्या काळात दिल्ली घेतली असती तर कदाचित तयारी नव्हती, घेतली असती तरी परत तो तिथं झालो असतो. आपण फार मोठं म्हणतो की इतिहास घडवला असता, पण पुन्हा पानिपत तिथंही झालं असतं. ही प्रॅक्टिस नसल्यामुळे सरांनी चांगल्या गोष्टी मेन्शन केल्या. आणि पुन्हा दक्षिण भारतातील अगदी वेंकोजी राजेंपासून कशी सुरुवात झाली तंजावरमध्ये, तिथून त्यांचे जे वारसदार आहेत कशा प्रकारे त्यांचे संबंध किंवा इतर गोष्टी राहिल्या सर्व दक्षिण भारतामधील हा जो मराठी सत्तेचे जे वारसदार आहेत, जसं आपण होळकर बघतो इंदोरमध्ये, ग्वाल्हेरचे शिंदे बघतो, त्याचं नाव आले आपण शिंदे म्हणतो, पण ऍक्च्युअली शिंदे होळकरच म्हणतो, पण ऍक्च्युअली होळकर प्रॉपर आपण हे लावून देतो त्याला. तर हे जे आहेत सरांनी अतिशय जबरदस्त, यू हॅव यूज सच अ नाईस वर्ड्स फॉर दॅट. युअर डिलिव्हरी स्टाईल वॉज व्हेरी ग्रेट. सो आय एम प्रेजिंग यू फॉर दॅट सर. आणि पुन्हा सरांचं आभार एकदा का मानणार तर सरांनी आपलं इन्व्हिटेशन स्वीकारलं. एक सेंट्रल युनिव्हर्सिटीचा एक भाग आहे पॉंडिचेरीचा, 7 संघ राज्य प्रदेशमध्ये जिथं केंद्रीय जे आहेत म्हणजे केंद्राच्या अंडरमध्ये सगळे या कॉलेजेस मोडतात. सेंट्रल युनिव्हर्सिटीच्या भागामधील शिक्षकांनी आपलं महाराष्ट्रामधलं आमंत्रण स्वीकारणं आणि पुन्हा आपल्या मराठ्याची जो हिस्ट्री त्याच्याबद्दल बोलायला फारसे इच्छुक नसतात. गोव्याचे एक सर चांगले माझ्या ओळखीचे, ते आधी हो म्हणले, पुन्हा नाही म्हणले, पुन्हा हो म्हणले, पुन्हा नाही म्हणले. हा मला अनुभव आहे की ते जरा धाडस करत नाही मोठं. मराठी जो वर्ड्स होते उसके लिए वो आ बोलते ना बोलते और ना बोलते, तो मुझे एक्सपीरियंस मैंने देखा. मैंने पहले दिन बोला मासा सर को यार बहुत खुशी हुई कि गोवा के भी एक जो सर है प्रोफेसर जो दोस्त है वो हाँ बोले फिर ना बोले फिर ना हाँ बोले फिर ना बोले. तो ये जो मैंने ये किया, तो आप ना हाँ बोले हाँ बोले हाँ बोले हाँ ही बोले आप. तो आय एम वेटिंग फॉर दॅट सर. तो त्यामुळे मी मनापासून तुमचा आभारी आहे सर. आय एम हार्टली कॉंग्रॅच्युलेशन टू यू फॉर ऍक्सेप्टिंग आवर इन्व्हिटेशन. So, yes, sir. With the permission of President Masa, this session is